Put some perspective on this. Joining us now is Wang Dan. She is the chief economist at Hang Seng Bank. Thank you very much for joining us. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I want to begin by kind of make sense of this for us, this latest news. China opening up, some economic growth that's going to be very tepid, but then good news perhaps coming in 2024.
Well, China's economic reopening is absolutely the #1 economic event this year, and it will push up demand for the global commodities, which might exacerbate the inflation pressure in Europe and the US, but also it can provide more goods, consumer goods, intermediate in industrial inputs. So overall, it just looks like China's back to the global picture, and that's mostly beneficial to both supply and demand.
I want to pick up on a couple of things you said. More goods coming perhaps down the pike, and that's certainly going to be good news after the chain breakdown over the past year, the supply chain breakdown. But there have been a number of factors weighing down the economy as well. COVID, global inflation, as you mentioned, as well as fighting in the Ukraine. Talk to me more about the concerns about the economy perhaps overheating.
Well, I wouldn't worry too much about overheating yet, because the most important and the biggest risk is that whether China can successfully reboot the housing market. Housing is the most important sector in China. It has been depressed since 2021. And right now, we're still in the worst housing recession since the 1990s. And before the housing market can have a reasonable rebound, we just cannot say that China's economy is on its way to be reheated. Mm-hmm. And right now, the consumer spending is higher, but still people are very cautious about splurging because the income growth have slowed very significantly since COVID has started.
Yeah, indeed, China, many Asian nations, people are known for being very efficient at saving money. I want to talk to you about what sectors you think could be leading the way in breathing life back into the economy, and also perhaps a little bit more about the concerns you have in the housing market.
Well, the housing market is the priority. We have seen more measures coming from the central government trying to provide more funds and help targeting the real estate developers. And there are also measures trying to encourage home buyers to get back to the market and buy more commercial housing. So far, those efforts has made some progress, but not nearly enough to actually revive the market. The main issue is that the housing market is now in this downturn, and people won't really want to get in before they see any signs of ticking up. The property tax is also under discussion. It's very likely to be rolling out this year or the next. So it just seems that people want to wait longer before they can put down such a large sum of money into the housing yet.
You know, like many nations, China also took steps during the real grip of the pandemic, if you will, to try to ease the suffering that people are going through from an economic standpoint by reducing some taxes, offering some benefits, especially to small businesses. Are we seeing some benefits from that right now?
The tax rebates last year were quite helpful to the manufacturing sector, but for small businesses, the impact was quite mild. The main reason was still from the consumer side. When people are reluctant to spend, then there's a liquidity problem for a lot of the small business owners. And now it's been 3 years since COVID has started. A lot of the business owners had better access to the financial market to restart whatever they want to do. But long-term investment is still questionable. Now the consensus is in the second half of this year, the economy will very likely to accelerate. But in the first half, we just don't know what kind of economic policies can be there. Monetary easing would be very helpful, but so far there's no real signal that that will happen.
It's interesting. We're going to keep track on the second half of this year and a lot of hope in terms of 2024. The United States has been leading perhaps the global concern about the possibility of a recession. What do you make of the growth that's going on now and your hopes for the second half of this year and your concerns about a global recession? Is that still a very realistic chance?
The global recession seemed to be a reality, And because of the aggressive rate hikes last year by both the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank, then this year the housing market in those two places have slowed down significantly. And we can't really have a meaningful revival of Chinese economy without a meaningful economic recovery in Europe and the US, because 35% of China's exports are aiming to those two markets. And for the US, it just seems that the inflation is still a real concern. We do not believe that Federal Reserve will stop the rate hike anytime soon. So if they continue to do that, that means housing and economic growth will still be slowed throughout this year and perhaps even into 2024.
Well, Don, I can't thank you enough for your insight. It certainly helped shed some light on it for us. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.